Chapter 7 is the skeletal system. This is, for some odd reason, I really don't know why, one of my favorites. I like the skeletal system. It does have a lot of parts and features that we're going to need to learn, especially in lab. But the nice thing is lecture kind of mirrors lab. We talk a lot about what the bones are. There's not a whole lot of covering function other than some movements, origin, insertion, joints, you know. And so you kind of get a double whammy here. I thought about skipping over it for time's sake, but then I realized it's best for you to go ahead and hear it twice, right? The more we hear it, the more we know it and understand it. Do take the time to look at and understand the word roots. I'm going to put in your file there. It's like 5 pages long, and you don't have to know them all, but I let you do some extra credit for this section that I think I'll probably still let you do. And part of that is going to be drawing out the bone, labeling all the features, because we don't just learn the bone names, we have to learn all the features as well, and we have to know where muscles can attach, that sort of thing. And so if you learn what the words mean, it really, really helps. And I'll really go over that in the lab, and I may put that paper probably will be found in the lab section, okay? But take the time on the back of those index cards, and there'll be directions in Blackboard, but on the back of those index cards, you'll break down that word. And at the very beginning of the semester, I think I talked about like being able to find the superior orbital foramen. I think that's the example that I used. And if you understand what all those words mean, then it really eliminates the white knuckle rote memorization, because there are over 200 bones in the body. We have to learn almost all of those bones. I've cut a few of the really tiny ones out, and you just learn the group names. But we also have to learn the features and parts on those bones. So it's a lot of information. And it really, really pays off if you will go ahead and learn what those words mean. Remember, superior means above. Orbital, we're talking about the orbital of the eye, and I cannot see myself at all right now. So the orbital of the eye. And if you know that foramen means a hole, then you know you're looking for a hole above the orbital of the eye. Okay? And so that really helps. It tells you right where to look instead of just trying to memorize it. And so if you'll take the time and do that, it'll really help and it will pay off. Because then when you move into the muscular system and they say the origin is at this place, or the insertion is such and such, or when we get into anatomy 2 and you're looking for blood vessels or nerves and it passes through a particular foramen, which is the hole that something passes through, then you're going to know where to look. Okay, and so particularly in the online platform, you have to take accountability and responsibility for your learning. You need to look at this class and what am I going to learn, not how am I going to get a grade. Okay, so you need to take responsibility for that learning. You will see a lot of this information again on those nursing entrance exams for both programs. Okay, so don't cheat and sell yourself short. Learn the stuff to keep it long-term retention. Okay, that's my speech for today. So we don't tend to think of them that way, but bones are living and they're multifunctional. We think of them, their main goal is support, which is true, but that's not the only function. So here are some fast facts. We've got the human skeleton that initially starts out as cartilaginous and fibrous membranes. Hyaline cartilage especially, and for a long time the embryo, or for a period of time, an embryo in the womb is made wholly of pretty much hyaline cartilage that then later changes into bone. So hyaline cartilage is the most abundant cartilage. It's very pretty, kind of, I think. It's one of my favorite tissues to learn. By the age of 25, your skeleton is completely hardened, or it should be. We've got 206 bones that make up the adult skeleton, which is 20% of your body mass. So if that makes you feel any better, take 20% off your weight. 80 bones are for the axial skeleton, and 126 are for the appendicular. And we're going to look at what the axial and the appendicular skeleton are. The nice thing is a lot of those bones are paired, so that takes down the number we have to learn as well. Okay, and you probably already know a few of the bone names. You probably already know some of them. So what are the organs of the skeletal system? I bet you're probably thinking, well, there are no organs of the skeletal system, but that's not true. The bones are the organs of the skeletal system. These are made of many different tissue types, including bone tissue, cartilage, dense connective tissue, bone and nervous tissue. We also have different types of bone tissue. We have compact bone and spongy bone. So there is quite a bit to learn here, and we probably already learned about the histology. So support and protection for softer tissues is, of course, a big function here. Also, providing a point of attachment for muscles. Our muscles have to have something to attach to, and there are many features we'll be learning, which are points of attachments for muscles. These also house the blood-producing cells. Red bone marrow is found in the end of long bones, and this is where we make our red blood cells. And then they house and store inorganic salts like calcium. So a bone's shape makes possible its function. So even on a larger scale, structure determines function. You can see here we have a diverse size and shape. These vary greatly in their different size and shape. They do have similar structure, development, and function in some ways. Bony projections on some of these are called processes, and these provide sites of attachments for things like ligaments and tendons. We have grooves or openings on them which serve as passageways for blood vessels, for nerves. They can have a depression in one bone where you may have another bone that articulates and acts as a hinge, okay? And so there are lots of features and landmarks, so to speak, on the bones that we're going to be learning about. So since we have such a vast variety of different bones, we do need a way to classify them. And so we classify them as long bones. You can see they're on on A. I think that's probably the femur there. Or nope, that's the humerus. There's the long bone there for A, right here. This is the humerus. And then we have irregular bones because they are irregularly shaped. And you can see we have a vertebrae is a good example of an irregular bone. On the long bone, it's got a long axis and it expands at the end. Another example might be the forearm, or the thigh bone, like I said, the femur. Short bones, we have some short bones here, like the talus. They are cube-like, equal in length and width. So if you can use your imagination and pretend that's real cube-like, it's kind of cube-like. And you'll find these in your carpals and metacarpals, like where you're in your wrist and your ankle. And these actually, individual ones do have individual names, like hamate. But we are going to just learn them as a group. I'm not going to make you learn all the little individual bones in your wrist. So you think it's a lot, but I'm actually giving you a little less than I have to, okay? Then we have flat bones like the sternum, and they're more plate-like. They can have a broad surface. Some other examples would be ribs, scapula, the skull. Irregular bones can have various shapes and sizes or be connected to other bones. Another example besides the vertebrae there would be like the facial bones. You'll see we have a whole lot of bones in our head, a whole lot. We have sesamoid or round bones. Okay, that's going to be a sesamoid, which is kind of a subclassification of a short bone. They're small, nodular, and often in tendons or close to joints. An example of this would be your patella, your knee. And remember that shape makes the function possible. So structure determines function. If you get one thing out of any of my classes, I hope you get that, because it's very important in how our body works, both microscopically and macroscopically. So we're going to have a lot of little slides here, and basically we're just going to add one word, or we're going to identify the parts of these bones as we go. And so we'll go through them really quickly. I'll leave it that way so when I print it out, it's not over the top of everything, okay? So the diaphysis is the shaft of the bone, and you can see that portion here. From here to here, that is the diaphysis. This lies between the epiphysis or epiphysis. Okay, so what does epi mean? Epi means above, so it's going to be above. And of course, that's the expanded portion at each end, which is going to articulate or form a joint with another bone. So we have an epiphysis on each end of the diaphysis. We have a proximal epiphysis. Proximal means nearest to the point of attachment, closest to the inside of the body, okay, closest to the midline. So it's the expanded portion at the proximal end closest to the body, all right? The expanded portion at the distal end furthest from the body, furthest from the point of attachment, is the distal epiphysis. So we have epiphyseal plates, which you are probably actually familiar with, you just don't know it, right? So you can kind of see them there right here. Oh, if my pen will work. You can see them right here. Those are epiphyseal plates. These are what we commonly call growth plates. And so this is where the location of the bone is not fixed and it will continue to grow and lengthen. And so those are important to know if you are in radiology or working in that genre somehow, orthopedics. If you break something along the growth plate, it may not continue to grow, which can cause a deformity. So that's important to understand whether those are still active, being like the growth plate is still open, or if growing has stopped and is closed. All right, so next we have the metaphysis, and this is the widening portion of the bone between the epiphysis and diaphysis. And so this is right here where it's starting to get thicker, okay? And you can see it's on both ends here. Next, we have the articular cartilage. This is the outer surface of the bone, and this is made of hyaline cartilage. And so you can see this on the edge here, articular cartilage. Next, we have the periosteum. Peri means around, and so this is the covering around the bone. It is deep or below the articular cartilage, and it's made of a very dense connective tissue. It is a tough vascular covering. It's firmly attached to the bone and connects with tendons and ligaments. If you have, well, it also helps form and repair bone tissue. If you've boiled some chicken, sometimes you can actually see this pull away from the bone. And here in the picture, they're kind of showing it there, opened up and pulled away. So it's basically kind of almost, I don't want to use the word skin because I don't want you thinking of skin. It's not skin, but it's kind of like a skin, a wrapping around the bone. Okay. So here we have compact bone. It's harder to see here, but that's the one that's so nice and easy to identify in histology. Remember the one with the big concentric circles? The wall of the diaphysis is made of compact bone. This can also sometimes be called cortical bone, but you don't hear that too terribly much. It is continuous with that extracellular matrix, so there's no gaps, in other words. And this helps to form the walls of the diaphysis. Now we have spongy bone, which is also called cancellous bone. This composes the epiphysis. That's what the epiphysis is made of. This cancellous bone or spongy bone consists of lots of branching plates called trabeculae, and this actually reduces the bone's weight. All right, and so this is literally kind of a spongy looking bone. And so this is going to be deep to compact bone, but it's really important that it does reduce the bone's weight, because if our bones were all compact bone, they would be extremely heavy. Here we're looking at the medullary cavity, This is the hollow chamber in the bone. It's kind of continuous with the space of the spongy bone. The medullary cavity of a long bone is lined with a thin cellular layer, and that's what we call the endosteum. All right. And so you can see if you take out the blood vessels in the yellow marrow here, that would be the medullary cavity. It's the opening. The endosteum is a thick membrane containing some bone-forming cells there. It's hard to see in this picture. You can see it's identified here, kind of over the spongy bones. It's kind of hard to see there, but this is what's important is that this contains the bone-forming cells. That's going to be osteocytes and osteoblasts. So we have two types of marrow. We have red marrow and yellow marrow. This is a specialized soft tissue. It fills the medullary cavity. The red bone marrow is important. It functions in the formation of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So that's where all of those are formed. Yellow bone marrow is involved in the storage of fats. The fat in yellow bone marrow is stored in the adipocytes. The fat can be used as an energy source when needed. It also contains mesenchymal stem cells, and these are cells that can develop into bone, fat, cartilage, or muscle cells. So hopefully you remember and recognize this picture here on the left. This is the microscopic view of compact bone. Mature bone cells are what we call osteocytes. These are in bony chambers called lacuna. Remember, lacuna, I always think lagoon. And these form these concentric circles around what we call that haversian or central canal. So there's the canal, and you can see the concentric circles, and then these are the little lacuna there. Osteocytes transport nutrients and waste. The extracellular matrix of bone is mostly made up of collagen and those inorganic salts like calcium. There's other ones as well. Collagen helps make bones resilient. That's what helps keep them from being brittle. Inorganic salts is what makes them hard. And so you want to have the right balance of that. And when you don't, you have things like brittle bone disease, or you can have bones that are actually too soft. There's lots of disease process involved in those. Mature bone cells are osteocytes. Remember, osteoblasts were the immature. When they mature, we call them osteocytes. These are found in lacuna. In those concentric circles, we call the haversian canals. Several of these together form the compact bone, and they run longitudinally. Let's see if we can find that on here for you. It's kind of hard for me to read this. Anyway, here's the perforating canal here. Okay, so this is going to be the longitudinal canals, right? And then we have perforating canals as well. Each canal contains blood vessels that nourish bone cells. The perforating canals are also called Volkmann's canals. Those are the ones that run sideways. It's really kind of almost more perpendicular here, but kind of sideways. And they also contain blood vessels, but nerves as well. And then, of course, you can see all these parts on here that we learned about in histology. Spongy bone is that porous bone made of osteocytes and some extracellular matrix as well. Remember, these do not have central canals, but they do have small canals or channels that we call caniculi. Okay? The osteocytes are in the lacuna within the trabeculae. The spongy bone matrix is laid down there in the trabeculae.